Okay, good morning, Revolution. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our program, Good Morning Revolution, our Friday morning regular feature on YouTube Live. And welcome back to GMR, Rosanna. Haven't seen you in a few weeks, and we're happy to have you back. And also
Yeah.
Kay, also from New York, and Ethan from New York. And welcome both. All three of you haven't been on for a while, so it's good to see you. And we have a pretty full agenda this morning. We have a report back from Springfield, Ohio. In fact, I was there yesterday with a few comrades to check out some of the some of the city and to have enjoy some Haitian food. But really, we're talking about Haitian anti-immigrant rhetoric that's been in the news lately, and we'll segue later into some labor news that has been going on this past week. So let's start with the situation of anti-immigrant hatred that really, as you know, I mean, it's been in the news. Trump and Vance have been using the presence of legal immigrants. Now, those are legal immigrants in our communities to foment fear and hatred among the followers of Trump and Vance. And no doubt that will tip some into anti-immigrant violence. In fact, there have been 30 bomb threats and other incidents of violence or threatened violence in Springfield since last week's debate. So it's kind of reminiscent for me of the ideas of the caravans in 2022, where they had these visions of parades of dangerous invaders coming closer and closer to our borders. But now that rhetoric is being applied to people, to ask people to see danger not in the border, but right there in their own communities. And it's from within this time. So I'm just going to start out in general. Kay, what has stood out to you most about the coverage that you've seen in about migrants in Springfield, Ohio, since the debate? There's been a lot of coverage in the news and some interviews. What stood out to you most, Kay?
I think, well, there are two things that stood out to me. The first is that this is a narrative that is not repeated by those who are in authority in Springfield, from the mayor to the local police, even to the governor of Ohio. They've all denied the claim that Trump and Vance and those associated forces have been making, that there are migrants that are endangering the people and disturbing the peace through all these ways that they claim. And so that really stands out to me because it's like they're not even trying to justify what they're saying. And as a matter of fact, one of the things that J.D. Vance talked about was how he has the right to create stories if he needs to for the Trump Vance ticket to win in November. So that's something that we should keep in mind when we hear things that come out of their mouths, is that they reserve the right to lie to our faces about this. And the other thing that I've noticed is that this has not been contained to Springfield. A lot of other right-wing networks and news outlets have also been reporting on migrants that may be doing the same things that are claimed to be done in Springfield in their local areas. For example, the Queens Club just put out a notice on the party website about uh, the right of migrants to live in peace and to not be disturbed by what's going on and all this anti-immigrant hate, because the New York Post has put out news claiming that migrants have been, killing animals and disturbing the peace here in New York. So this is really just, it looks like they're grabbing at straws for anything that can divide the people who are united against them.
Hmm. Thanks, Kay. Yes, Rosanna, I think that there's a lot of similarities, not just among different communities, but also among different times in history and different places in the world. Different nations have experienced this same kind of racist, anti-immigrant, or yeah, just racist hatred Can you do you see Trump and Vance's rhetoric as fitting into a larger body of anti-immigrant or of just generally fascist propaganda?
Well, I think that they are really grabbing for straws in terms of they understand that they're on the losing side now, and so they're trying to figure out how much more they could uh, divide the working class. And my grandfather, my grandfather, and my grandmother, and even my mother, who was a U.S. citizen, were expatriated back in the 1931. We have documents that say that. And it's the same kind of thing, right after the crash of the stock market in 29, they began to use Mexicans as scapegoats, that it's, the Mexicans who are taking the jobs. It's the Mexicans who are causing this horrible poverty. And but it's that same kind of tactic to try to divert us from who is the real cause of this of the situation, the living, what we're living now. And so I think that the biggest lesson for me is we have to be very, very mindful and always look deeper into stories that we hear, time and time again. Even with this story about the Haitians, there was just one woman who made a very just a comment, so to speak, but not with any kind of intent, and it was just picked up. And then there's now they're digging in deeper and showing that, in fact, the cat that was missing was in the basement, and all of these kinds of things. So we really have to be very, very alert to making sure that we look deeper into any story that we hear, even gossip that we hear about people in our communities and things like that. Because those are the kinds of things that divide the working people, that divide the movements. And so we have to learn from these lessons that the right uses time and time again, because it continues to work, but not as much as over the years, because people are learning. But we have to learn and really uh, be mindful of what they're trying to do.
Thank you. Yeah, Ethan, we have. I know you have had experience with small towns in Ohio, and now you live in this booming multinational metropolis of Brooklyn, New York. How do you think that compares? Can this kind of racist rhetoric go over better or stronger in a place like Springfield or Zanesville, another town you're familiar with? Or and does it I mean, what Kay said, it sounds like it's going on right now in New York City too. How is the environment affecting the reception of this kind of rhetoric?
Yeah, I think this is in tech, okay, and Rosanna. I think this is historically what capitalism does when there's crisis. And it's, in their response to the failures of, potential, bourgeois democracy, you have the response to edge towards fascism. And we see that even under, Trump's response to the pandemic and that crisis, that ineptitude, that failure of the unplanned, chaotic, um, nature of capitalism, we rely on things like this. That's yeah, during the pandemic, it was about anti-Asian hatred. It was about deflecting the failures of capitalism, the ruling class, to do anything for us meaningfully. And I think you see that in New York. You have those attacks historically on the Asian community. Just in recent memory, you have those perceptions with immigrants, particularly Central American immigrants, still, based on this race baiting, this division, this conversation. Um, we have that in Springfield, but you see that here in terms of looking for migrant housing or homeless shelters here in the city, in the fight back and the divisions amongst communities here when it comes to building in our communities, or welcoming in new people into our communities. And I think that message does resonate under capitalism when you have the constant chaos, the ineptitude. And I think the response, is social programming. It is socialism in action, is organized labor, and is investing in our communities and building a response to these problems together that's inclusive, that pushes back against the chaos that is capitalism.
Exactly. Kay, what do you think our party should do to fight anti-immigrant violence? I mean, what should what and have you seen any good examples of what the people of Springfield have done, or what should we do? Should the mayor refuse to let Donald Trump speak in his town, for example, or what do you think we should try to do as a party to
I
fight
think,
this?
yeah, I think a refusal like that, not letting Trump speak in Springfield, uh, is a good thing to strive for, especially considering that he's shown no care for the actual people there. I remember hearing a story about someone whose child was killed in an accident, and uh, Trump and Vance have shown no care for the actual family who have been asking them uh, to not use their child's name to spread hate. And so I think when the party shows up and says, to people who are so affected uh, by what's going on with these narratives, and says, hey, we see your pain, we hear your pain, we see the community that you're trying to build here, and we are a part of it, we are of it, we're with you. Um, Anything that the party does to come together with others who are so affected by this hateful rhetoric, um, that is good to do in this case. So I think I've seen that that this has actually happened in Springfield. The Haitian community has come together, and the people in Springfield who are not Haitian have also come and said, "Hey, we we do not condone the lies that are being spread in our name, and we won't let that be the legacy of or the story of Springfield, Ohio, on the national stage. We stand with the people who build Springfield with us." So,
Good. Yes, I agree wholeheartedly, and I think the people of Springfield have shown a little bit of that solidarity in their demonstration the other day. Um, Rosanna, do you think this anti-immigrant hate? I hate to think about even the possibility of another Trump term, but how do you think this kind of anti-immigrant hate would play out if God forbid that person was redelivered to the White House. And yeah, what does this portend for social life after that situation happens? Further division in the working class, and also who benefits? I mean, we got a little bit to the point of class analysis of this. Who benefits from this kind of anti-immigrant hate? It seems like the corporate elite, that have these that are hiring, and they have these jobs available for the Haitians. They've been going in the media and saying we love to employ Haitian people, and they're all on the other side. Who is benefiting from this, or is it just the campaign? Do you think?
Well, it's a little hard to say, the full benefit or not benefit, but I think, I can't imagine how many people, when he talks about deporting 11 million plus people, I don't know how that's going to happen or whether we're even going to allow it to happen. The people we're much stronger and than the few that are still attending rallies and talking. They get a lot of media attention, but in the end, the numbers are there. We have the larger numbers. So if it was to happen in November, we need to immediately band together and unite and fight against this. We can't allow it to happen. There's still, just because he got elected, doesn't mean that the fight is over. In fact, it just intensifies. But and we have to really organize and build mass movements to be able to to fight against it. We have a fighting chance. So it's always about dividing people. That's what racism does. That's why it's the way it is. The abortion issue also does the same thing. It divides people. So we have to look at it for what it is and not allow it to happen. And don't allow it to divide us. Let's find the common grounds. Let's work together because we do have the numbers and we can make the change that's necessary.
Hmm. Thank you. Ethan, one more question on this. I listened to an Ohio program, and one of the Ohio uh, Republican strategists said, someone challenged him and said, well, that isn't the truth. And what his reaction was truth schmooth. Who cares if it's the truth? And how can people be so gullible that they're accepting this, even though Vance, as Kay said, he went on ABC and said that, or somewhere, and said that he created the story, and then he gave the Wall Street Journal a so-called proof that turned out to have been debunked weeks before. So what's the relationship? How can we get people to be more critical consumers of what politicians are saying to them?
Yeah, I think people in progressive spheres, organized labor, we owe it, to our constituents and to the public at large, um, to have that analysis and push back and provide more realistic, or not more realistic, but the truthful narratives, the reality of situations like places like Ohio or Pennsylvania or Wisconsin, that were decimated by neoliberal economics. And there's a certain section of their grievances in terms of loss of purchasing power and the ability to retire that went away with the North American Free Trade Agreement, which also decimated agrarian life in Mexico. And we see this real loss of economic opportunity for working people all across the United States. And we need a Democratic Party that fights for the needs of people, that's responsive to the needs of working people. But we also need real robust political programming inside of the people's organizations and coalition partners, that articulate a different vision, a critical vision, and a vision that holds those in power accountable for these problems, and prepares people and inoculates people against racist hatred, because that's what's being fed to the people of Ohio right now. And that's across the entire country. That's the fear they're trying to stoke right now, is over racialized concerns or concerns over immigration, and it's back to their chaos, their failure, their ineptitude to provide livings for people. And instead of addressing the actual economic grievances of working people all across this country, regardless of their race or immigration status, they go towards division because they don't want material change. But it's up to us as communists, as members and activists within the women's rights movement, within organized labor, within Black Lives Matter movements, and the anti-war movements, to bring these truthful narratives forward and articulate a vision for our neighbors all across the country of a world in which togetherness and collective understanding of each other's problems, and working towards solutions together versus some type of racist boogeyman. That's the answer to go forward.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you for the segue into the subject of organized labor too, Ethan, which is our next topic for today. And it's true that organized labor is going to be incredibly important here. By the way, I think there's an October 5th rally being planned right now in Springfield. I guess organized maybe by the Democratic Party. But organized labor is going to be taking a part in that if rumors hold true. But yeah, Rosanna, as Ethan said, there's been so many concessions, give backs, that the workers endured in 2008 when the economic crisis of capitalism hit so many people so hard. And also in the pandemic when workers were considered essential workers and made to work. And now it's time to get the benefits of that work. Employers have had all these profits. Could you talk a little, Rosanna, about how those kind of concessions actually affected workers' lives and how they've increased profits for the corporate ruling class? And how can we make those contrasts clear, do you think?
That's a lot. That's
It is.
a lot of details, but I think the corporations always look for ways to take advantage of workers, and they saw this during the pandemic. They saw this during the 2008 crash, and they look to gouging. Even the stores, they start gouging folks, and they find ways to make profit off of the misery of others, or take advantage by using these kinds of things, and appealing to our humanity as workers of yeah, well, okay, yes, we have to make sure that as many people survive, and all of these kinds of things. So they took advantage of that, but now the workers are seeing that no, we gave because we felt it was a necessary thing. It was doing our part, but now you all have to do your part. Now we see how you took advantage of us. Now we see how CEOs got a huge benefit, retirement benefits, huge in the millions, and how you continue to make profit while we are still suffering. Some people have, the PTSD from working in these areas during the pandemic. All of those kinds of things. They have their own health issues, and they have to fight for the health care. So I think, now we see the workers are saying enough is enough. We saw it with, I forget which one, not too long ago.
Audit
Not,
workers,
not just the UAW, but the most recent strike that's happening now. I think, I'm sorry if I'm
Boeing
blanking out.
maybe.
What? The CWA,
Boeing.
isn't it? Yeah,
Oh,
Boeing.
CWA, right. Hmm.
Boeing,
There's so
CWA,
many.
the teams, yeah, they're all saying, "Oh hell no, this has got to stop. We're no longer, in this situation, and now we see what you did to us." And so workers are understanding their power, and being able to stand up and unite in a way that we haven't seen for decades, really, which is very, very positive.
Thank
I don't
you.
know if that fully answered your question, but
Well, it would take a long time, I think, to fully answer that kind of a question, but I appreciate your response. And Ethan, I have a question for you, because I don't know about others, but my labor education was minimal. I wasn't taught about anything about labor unions in my education experience. And one of the things that came up in these articles that we read for this week is the sheer number of complaints about unfair labor practices. That I think it said there are 15,000 complaints so far this year lodged against. And could you tell us what are unfair labor practices, and why do you think they've been so such an increase in the number of complaints made here?
Well, yeah,
Educate us.
that's yeah. So, an unfair labor practice overall is a violation of the National Labor Relations Act. Unions can do them, actually. Employers can do them, but it's usually the employers who do them. It's usually us in organized labor who file the charges with the National Labor Relations Board over alleged misconduct and interpretation of the law, in which, first and foremost, there's two major unfair labor practices that people usually file, one of which would be personal retaliation of an employer against an employee or a group of employees for engaging in union activity. If that's, your hours got cut because the boss found out you went to a union meeting, or you got fired, but you've actually been on the organizing committee of the union, and they said it's because you were late one time, but it's actually because you were starting a union. So that's traditional, kind of comical, what we see in movies of just straight up retaliation against union activity. There's also the second most common would be unfair labor practices in terms of negotiations. So bad faith bargaining, delay tactics, or refusal to respond to the union's proposals, the refusal to engage in like good faith bargaining, which would mean responding in general. And so what we see and what we've seen over the course of the past few years in organized labor's kind of resurgence, um, is under at the end of the day, under Biden's National Labor Relations Board, there has been a variety of rulings that enhance our rights under the National Labor Relations Act, which was originally written to the benefit of corporations. But now we've had judges and administrative judges rather, and law and attorneys at the NLRB who are reinterpreting the National Labor Relations Act and creating precedent that supports workers' rights more and more. So what we're seeing is an enforcement of the existing law in the favor of workers, and a taking seriously of our complaints and our allegations, and a real expenditure of resources on behalf of the government on their side to really investigate our issues and to find companies in meaningful ways, because frequently, like retaliation against union leaders in an organizing drive might cost a company $40,000, $80,000, $120,000, which is chump change when it comes to having to spend millions of dollars in wage increases or better health insurance that a union will negotiate for the people they help support to organize. So what we see is organized labor viewing the ULP, the unfair labor practice route, as a more efficient and more meaningful way to fight back against employers under Biden's NLRB. And so that's where you see the uptick, is that there's meaningful financial ramifications, that we are actually enforcing the existing laws. We're expanding the cost of those laws. So instead of a routine organizing drive and violating people's rights and smashing that, costing you about 100K or 40K, that we can double, we're just going to do layup after layup on ULPs against you. The government will enforce the law, and we're going to make this cost a lot of money if you insist on violating people's rights. So that's why you see people, filing these, and why we have 15,000 out there. Why people are going on strike over ULPs as well, is that the law, is being interpreted in our favor for the first time. And I think, at least my lifetime, and maybe even your all's, I think this is the best NLRB anybody could have hoped for.
Wow, that's good. That answers a question I had subsequently too. So we'll get back to some of that. But I did have a really a question for UK, because I know you've had some experience in the tech sector, and I know a lot of the tech sector folks work at home. And this question comes out of a book that I read in graduate school, probably one of the only union books we read, and that was a book called Union Democracy, about the ITU, the printers union, and why did the research question is, why do they have such a vibrant democratic union? And the answer was because these telegraph printers, they had a lot of downtime that they'd spend in a break room together, and they'd have a chance to talk with each other. And I wondered about tech workers who are working at home. And do you think people working at home affects their ability to organize? I mean, I don't think worker to worker can communicate very well without their employers knowing it. And that question, and also, are there other barriers that you see to tech workers in particular in terms of organizing to collectively bargain for their wages and their working conditions?
Yes, I would say certainly the fact that we tend to work from home is used against us. And the analogy I want to use for people who maybe don't work at home, uh, is one of uh, the loss of public space. So you might think of, you used to have a park in your town, and then developers come in and they say, "Oh, we want to repurpose this park and build some sort of store or strip mall or something like that." And so people lose that ability to commune with one another in a place where you don't have to pay money. We see this, for example, here in New York City with the public libraries, where there's this constant fight to keep the libraries funded, to keep them running. And the same thing is happening with space in the workplace for workers to talk with one another in a way that they're not constantly surveilled by their boss. So when I'm working from home in tech, I often ran into an issue where I wanted to talk to my coworkers about something, where we were getting too much work, or the work requests that we were getting were just completely unreasonable. And I found that uh, I tried to contact them and they're exhausted, because they work so many hours. They have some people on 24-hour shifts or 16-hour shifts, to make sure that things are running 24/7. And if I want to talk to them during the workday, I have to use a messaging system where the company can see every single message that I send. So there is thought, a lot of thought that goes into uh, how thinking about how we organize as tech workers and how do we build these spaces. So there's an organization that I try to stay connected with called the Tech Workers Collective that tries to host things outside of work. Um, you might still have to pay some money if it's at a bar or something, but we try to build those spaces where workers can talk to one another and have these places where they can just talk about their lives and encounter each other, uh, not only as work colleagues, but as complete human beings, and then talk about, like, hey, I have a kid at home and I can't take care of them because I'm stuck here at the office or I'm stuck at my computer. Or, you know, I used to have all these great hobbies, but now I don't have time to practice them, or I don't have the money to practice them because we haven't gotten a raise in the past several years. So people are thinking about this issue, how to organize in a setting where companies are starting to do this. And you see this not just, I guess you could think of it as tech, but places like Uber or people working gig work on like Fiverr, things like that. They really have to form spaces on their own where they can come together and discuss the issues that they're facing on the job.
Thank you. That is a really interesting point. I remember hearing about public spaces to organize when contrasting the built environment of Havana, Cuba, with any other city in the United States, with any city in the United States. Havana has many, many more places where thousands of people can come together and have public events. Well, now I want to turn to, and it's good to hear about the Tech Workers Collective. I'm glad that initiative is happening. I want to turn to one last thing today. The other big labor news this week is coming out of the Teamsters Union. And I'm kind of glad we're talking about this because it gives me a chance to walk back any stupid things I said on Good Morning Revolution in the past about Sean O'Brien. I had hoped that he would, after talking to the RNC, I had hoped he would come up and endorse Kamala Harris, but they have announced that they are not endorsing a candidate. And the Teamsters have endorsed Democrats for president since Al Gore in 2000. So earlier this week, they published results of internal polling that showed that Harris didn't have the support of a majority of the members. And because, but they didn't want to endorse Donald Trump either, because Trump has had such anti-union practices and policies, including praising the way Elon Musk has fired striking workers. And Trump has expressed openness to a national right to work ban. The right to work for less, that is. So they aren't supporting Trump either. But Rosanna, what do you think? How do you think unions should make endorsement decisions? Should they be looking at policies and practices of candidates, or should they just poll their members and take the majority position, or
Well,
something else?
I mean, I don't know, I don't know that I could tell unions what to do,
Mm,
so to speak. But I think, you know, if they're worker centered, they're always consulting with the workers on everything and respecting the desire of the workers. And that's, to me, that's key. Always maintaining that constant contact with the workers and what they see is the best for themselves, not have somebody that you know is the higher in a higher body or whatever, like president or something. Doesn't They don't have the right to just decide on their own. So I think it has to be worker centered. Everything should be worker centered, and holding meetings, holding study groups, or all of these kinds of things that where workers can come together and discuss some of these issues, and be able to have make an informed decision on that. It's interesting what's happened with the Teamsters. I mean, even their polling, when they polled the membership, clearly, Biden was winning and Harris was winning, but then all of a sudden they hire these private companies, and the numbers shifted. I don't understand that. I don't
mm,
understand how that. I mean, I know, it's probably my guess. It's probably manipulated, but it's something to really think about. And I mean, I was fearful that they were going to endorse Trump. So to me, that's a kind of a win in a way that they could not endorse him, even though the maybe the leadership wanted to, but the workers actually really spoke and said, no, we're not doing that. That's my
right.
take from what I've read. Yeah.
Thank you. At least they've held that off. So, Ethan, what do you make of this decision of O'Brien, or I guess the board of the union? I understand it's caused a huge rift in among the Teamsters, and I don't know when Sean O'Brien's term is up as president, but I've heard that he's in trouble. So, what do you make of that development this week among the Teamsters?
Yeah, I mean, it was exceptionally disappointing. He would give the RNC any amount of credence. I personally, I have my grandfather's Teamster hat right behind my shoulder. The Teamsters separated my family from abject poverty, so it's like personally egregious to lead any amount of credence to this process. The Teamsters membership is racially and nationally diverse. I don't think these and politically educated. They've had a long-term um, progressive caucus, left-wing caucus within their movement since the days of Hoffa Jr. and the concessions post Jimmy Hoffa Sr. moving into Hoffa Jr. So, like they've had a politically engaged, educated membership base through Teamsters for a Democratic Union. And Sean O'Brien and Fred Zuckerman of Local 89 out of Louisville, Kentucky, and O'Brien out of the Northeast, they came together and created a national platform using the progressive mechanisms that have been built over decades of struggle through the Teamsters for a Democratic Union. They use these mechanisms to launch a national campaign to unseat an unpopular, reactionary, pro-business or pro-concessionary Teamsters leadership. And then they come up with these numbers. There should be a lot of data, or there should be some questions rather on how we got to these numbers, who was polled, how they were polled, because this is not the Teamsters that I've met. This is not indicative of their membership base, which is broadly diverse, broadly multinational, and broadly well educated on working class and racial issues. So it is what I would say is a cynical power grab in which Sean O'Brien is shoring up a core, 30% membership vote of white members, maybe in the United States, maybe more in Canada. And it's also, I guess, the only pragmatic thing we could look at is strengthening their hand when it comes to negotiating directly with the Democratic Party, White House, or Congress. That would be the only pragmatic thing is, what have you done for me lately? We're not going to endorse because we don't feel like you've done much for us lately. But beyond that, like with this entire show today, we're talking about the demonization of Haitians. Who are Teamsters members, across Ohio, across Florida, across New York. So, just opening up, for racist violence against other working people, against their members, for some cynical power grab to make sure Sean O'Brien stays in power, to make sure they can talk to the White House with a little bit more gusto if Harris wins or if Trump wins. Like it's disgusting and it's shameless. And I'm sorry for being so passionate about it, publicly, but it is egregious, and it violates everything that Teamsters stand for, and what organized labor stands for.
Mm-hmm. As a grandson of a Teamster, you have every right to speak your mind on this issue. So finally, our last issue, and Kay, I'll turn to you for this. We had another sort of a non-endorsement this week, and that was from the Uncommitted movement, the National Uncommitted movement. They issued a statement that has 3 directives. First, they are not endorsing Harris, Vice President Harris. Second, they're opposing Donald Trump. And third, they don't recommend endorsing a third party or voting for a third party. So what is a voter to do here? And what do you think the Uncommitted, how do you think the Uncommitted movement should move forward?
Well, it sounds to me like they're moving forward just fine. When you list those 3 directives, and when I did read the statement that they put out, it reminded me actually of our own party's approach. We are not endorsing Harris. We still think people should vote against Trump, which concretely means voting for Harris. But we're not just voting for Harris to praise her, right? This is not a moral act. We are voting for Harris because we think that she provides a space that is more easily navigated by the working class and the oppressed peoples of the United States. And this is the same thing that the Uncommitted movement is saying. They are claiming that, look, Harris did not speak to us. The DNC did not allow us to speak, did not allow Palestinians to speak. And so, since this is our issue, we're not going to endorse Harris, which is good for them to stay with their principles. But their principles also say that they want to win a ceasefire. They want to win peace for people in Palestine. So they're also not going to endorse Trump or throw things to the wind by having votes go to a third party candidate, especially since there are places, say in Michigan, where third party candidates have taken more votes than those by which Biden lost to Trump, for example, in Michigan. So they're paying attention really to the full landscape of what's going on and saying, look, we have a goal. Harris is not going to help us towards that goal, but she's not going to hurt us as much as Trump would. And we're committed to that goal. And the same thing applies for the party. I think the same thing applies for many of these mass movements, including labor, right? A lot of the labor unions are making the same decision, whether it's endorsing Harris because there's slightly better labor policies, or withholding that in the case of the Teamsters, and thank goodness they didn't decide to go with Trump because of those polls, which showed a slight majority, not overwhelming, but very slight preference for Trump, though we don't know how true that is because they didn't release all the statistics. So I think we continue, those of us who are following the Uncommitted movement and going for a ceasefire in Gaza, and people who are just concerned for their lives here at home. wanting to go to work and make enough to pay the bills and eat well at home and, take care of their children or their pets or their loved ones in their family or in their community. I think it is the working class stance that they're taking, and I was relieved to hear it.
Mhm. I agree. Okay, thank you. It was a very thoughtful statement that they did issue, and you characterize it well. So I'll let that be the last word for today. And I really appreciate all of your contributions today. Thank you. And as we always say at the end of Good Morning Revolution, come back next week on 10:30 or anytime really on YouTube on our channel. And you can send us email GMR at cpusa.org. So until next week, thank you all, and thank you for listening. Stay strong, stay in the fight, and we'll see you next week. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye.
Right.
Bye.